Hello, everyone. Welcome to PMF Connect. My name is Agnes from Product Management Festival. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for today's PMF Connect session with Radhika Dutt. It's wonderful to have so many of you here with us today. For those of you who are first time joining Product Management Festival sessions, I just wanted to give a quick intro on who we are and what we do. We are one of the world's largest community for product leaders. For about 7 years now, we are bringing product managers together from all over the world with the aim to amplify the impact of product management globally, to help product managers be more successful and to really make a real difference. We have various activities all around the world, including the yearly conferences in November in Zurich, which is just upcoming, and then in APAC in Singapore, the Singapore edition in June. We also have the PM Night After Work meetups, thanks to our local ambassadors, and the executive summits and circles and the product management executive education done with INSEAD together. And most importantly, fresh out of the press. Okay, so these are the activities. Sorry, for some reason it didn't work. And then fresh out of the press is the latest trends and benchmarks in PM report. Over 2,000 product professionals shared openly on psychological safety in PM, job satisfaction, leadership in product management, and many more. And you can get, here's the link, the QR code, you can get it here. It's a free report. You're welcome to spread it and share it with your network. And then we hope you enjoy. If you have any feedback, comments, please write us. And then, as I mentioned, the upcoming conference in November on the 11th, 12th in Zurich in November is taking place. So we are today here for PMF Connect with Radhika Dutt, who is co-founder of Radical Product Thinking. It's a movement of leaders creating vision-driven change. She's also the author of the upcoming book on radical product thinking that will be out September next year. She's an entrepreneur and product leader and has participated in 4 acquisitions as a result of the products she built. 2 of these were companies that she founded. So it's very exciting. She's very experienced and also speaking very experienced. Her tips, we have listened to her talks in Singapore last year, and it was really amazing, the workshop. So I hope you will enjoy. She's also currently on the product thinking. She's currently advisor on the product thinking to the Monetary Authority of Singapore. That's a mouthful. Before I hand it over to her, I just want to mention that it's an interactive session today. We're going to use Menti for the interactive part. I'm going to post the link, what you need to go do, and then where you need to go. Just a reminder that once you open the link, please make sure you stay there so you can respond to the questions. Radhika, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Agnes. So thanks, everyone, for joining. And Agnes, you can, I think there are some people still joining, so please feel free to just monitor that if you wouldn't mind. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And let's see, that should work. Okay. So we have a packed hour today, and what I really want us to get out of this is we're going to do some really thought-provoking exercises, and at the end of this, I want to walk away with a shared new understanding of what does it mean to be truly user-centric, right? And to really get to the heart of this, I want to share with you a small personal story. So a few years ago, my son was 7 at the time, and he came home just really excited. He was excited, and he says to me, "Mommy, you know, the teacher introduced us to a math game. Can I please, please, please play it?" And so, well, that sounds really good, right? And so, you know, it turned out that my daughter actually had also been introduced to the same math game. And where my son actually loved it, my daughter really hated it. And this was supposed to be a math game for advanced students in math. So it was a bit puzzling. And of course, you know, as a product manager, you really want to get to know more, right? So I sat down with my son and we looked at this game. And here's what it looked like. So it's basically Pokemon characters that are battling each other. And to be able to attack your opponent, you have to answer a math question right. So this is called Prodigy game. And my son loved it. And, you know, as soon as I saw this, right, it made sense. It made sense why he liked it and my daughter didn't. And it turns out that just this idea of combat in a game, it's very polarizing for girls versus boys. And so, you know, it got me thinking a little bit more. I was wondering, is this game targeted at boys, girls? How's the company positioning it? You guys know kind of how, as a product manager, you start rabbit holing into things, right? You know where I'm going. So I started looking a little bit more. And so here's what I saw in terms of marketing video that the company had. So you had boys and girls, mostly boys in the marketing video. And very often, the boys in the marketing video were pumping their fists, going, yes. And the girls, on the other hand, looked a lot more serious. They didn't seem to show the same sense of achievement. Whoops. That's what happens when we get over-enthusiastic while speaking. That was my microphone. I hope that didn't hurt anyone's ears. And so, you know, girls in this video weren't as enthusiastic and showing the sense of accomplishment in math. So, you know, it got me thinking a little bit more. So I was testing this with my 2 users. So I asked my 2 kids, so what do you guys think? Is it targeted at boys, girls? And my son goes, boys, of course. Like, yeah. And to which my daughter had this really bitingly sarcastic comment. Here's what she said. She said, but don't worry, the next version will be for girls, and it'll have Disney princesses that'll invite you to tea if you get the answer right. Right? I'll let you think about that for a moment. And what's interesting to me, right, is that her comment was beyond Prodigy. It was beyond, you know, just these toy companies. But to me, it really went to the heart of what does it mean to be user-centric? Because very often for us, right, in a product company, our approach to how we think about being user-centric, we measure it through things like, you know, the level of user engagement, or we measure it through revenues and the number of users, etc. But her comment made me realize that, you know, being user-centric really begs us to ask a deeper question of how are we affecting people's lives? Because no matter what your product is, whether it's, you know, creating a dating site or it's a B2B SaaS tool, right? We are affecting people through our product. And so in this particular case for Prodigy, it turns out they're affecting about 50 million users. And the question that, you know, we want to ask then is, you know, in this case, what if there are 20 million users, girls, what if there are 20 million girls who develop a perception of themselves, thinking that maybe they're not as good at math as their peers in class, as some of the boys in class? You know, so what does that mean for the product itself? And sometimes in trying to be user-centric to some people, we end up creating collateral damage. And what I like to call out is this idea of digital pollution. So digital pollution is when we're creating collateral damage through our products, sometimes in the form of inequality, sometimes in the form of eroding our ecosystem, the information ecosystem, and so on. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves as product leaders, right, is our users, they really exist in the context of the wider society. And so the big question for us, if we're thinking about being user-centric, is, are we being truly user-centric if we're inflicting collateral damage on society? And I don't just mean this as a rhetoric question. I actually really do want to get your view on this. And so I want us to go to menti.com now. And if you can share your opinion in this poll, I'd love to see that. You can go to menti.com and you can use the code 7104. Are you guys able to get to it? Just raise your hand or say something on chat if you're having trouble.
Works for me.
And by the way, the result of this poll, I'm actually going to use that to shape the rest of this presentation. So it is really important for me to hear kind of where you guys stand in this area. Wow, that's a lot many more people actually that I thought who would fall in this category of seeing it as very important. So that's really encouraging to me. And it's wonderful that so many of you feel like it's important and really want to understand how this applies. This is awesome. So anyone else want to include yourself in the poll? Okay, so this is absolutely wonderful. So this helps me shape some of the rest. What we're really going to focus on in this in the rest of this session then is we're really going to work on the solution aspect. So how do we actually apply this idea so that we can be more user-centric by design, and how can we apply these concepts to ourselves so that it's not just something that applies to big companies? How can we be more user-centric by design? Okay, so getting back into the presentation. So I think, to be able to get to the solutioning part, right, first we have to understand the problem. So clearly, we don't have malicious intentions. So when we don't have malicious intentions, how do we end up inflicting this collateral damage? And the answer to that, right, is sometimes we end up over-relying on lean and agile. So what do I mean by that? We've learned so far that in building products, we must, test things in the market. We have to see what's working. And then as we see what's working, then we iterate, right? But in testing what's working, we end up using financial metrics. We typically test what's working on this one single dimension of financial metrics. And so that ends up being, things like, is this new feature bringing in more revenues? Are more people spending more time on site, right? And so the point with lean and agile is that lean and agile are helpful, but they're not enough for us to build truly user-centric products. And lean and agile both, they give us speed in getting to where we want to go. They help us get to where we want to go faster, but they're not good at helping us figure out where we need to be going. And so that's where radical product thinking comes in. So what is radical product thinking? It's a methodology that helps you build successful products that create the change that you really want to see in the world. And to create this, right, systematically, it uses shared language of product vision, strategy, and execution. And by using this shared language, it helps people in your organization really come with you on this journey. So the first core tenet of radical product thinking is that a radical product is your vehicle to create the change that you want to bring to the world. So very often we think about product as the end goal in itself. We look at the success of our product as the end goal. And instead, if we're building a radical product, our approach is that our product is only a vehicle to bring about that change. So, every time I say bringing about a change in the world, I do feel like I need to clarify that the change that you want to create, it doesn't have to be big, right? It can be big or small. You can even affect just 100 users, right? But it has to be a change that is meaningful to you and is something that's authentically, that you want to create in this world. And the idea of building truly user-centric products by design means that you can very systematically engineer your change, starting with, what's the vision for the change you see for your users, and then how do you translate it systematically into your everyday actions and how you measure success. And if you can communicate your rationale to other people on your team and in your organization, then what happens is, even when you're not in a meeting, your team can make those decisions just like you would, and you're spreading that user-centric approach in your organization. So let's take the first step, right? Let's talk about, what does a user-centric vision look like? So very often, a vision statement starts with words like to reinvent or to disrupt, or, my pet peeve right now is to empower, right? So here is one example, and this is a real company. The vision statement is contributing to human progress by empowering people to express themselves. Now, the thing is, right, we've all learned that your vision has to be big and aspiring. And so this vision absolutely fits that category, that it's big and truly aspirational. So then we ask, well, then what's wrong with this vision, right? And for that, I want us to do the following exercise. I want us to take a moment, and again, you're going to be using menti.com. So take a moment to give me an idea of a product or a company whose vision could be described by this vision of contributing to human progress by empowering people to express themselves. And I want us to really get creative. Hold on one second. I think I have to go to menti.com and first change slides. So yeah, I want us to get creative. So if you know the company whose vision this statement is, don't share that just yet. I want you to come up with ideas of, other products that can be described by this vision. And while you do that, right, I'm going to share one example. That's exactly, Twitter could be a good one. I see a lot of you are thinking about social media. Miro is another one. Instagram, yeah. Nike, interesting, you're right. That they do help people express themselves, right? Blogger. One idea I'll throw out there, oh yes, Adobe, there you go. Then, another example could be, a product that is creating spray paint, right, for graffiti. They're helping people express themselves. Oh, nice, publications. YouTube, excellent. So those are, exactly. So the point is that there are so many different products that could be described by this one vision. And the right answer, it turns out, is that this is Snapchat's vision. Let's see, give me 1 second. I'll share this screen again. Okay. So it turns out that it's Snapchat's vision. And so the problem with this, right, so why is that vision being so broad and applicable to so many products? Why is that bad? Because your vision needs to act like a filter. Your vision needs to act like a filter where if you have a feature that you're thinking about adding for your users, you need to be able to look at your vision and say, does this feature make sense for my user? Should I be adding it? And if it doesn't act like a filter, the answer to everything, whether it's building Post-its or it's creating spray paint, it's all part of your vision, right? And so that's why your vision needs to be a lot more detailed. And so your vision instead should answer these 4 questions. The first is, whose world are you setting out to change? What does their world look like today? Why does their world even need changing? Because the reality is maybe it doesn't need changing. And the last is, how are you going to change it for them? So it's the who, what, why, and the how. So to be able to write that out, the who, what, why, and how, into one coherent statement, you can use this fill-in-the-blank statement that we created for the Radical Product Thinking worksheet. So there's a whole toolkit that's available for free. And we created it so that it becomes easier to apply some of these philosophies into your everyday work. So, here's the vision statement. Some of you, if you've done the pre-work that I'd sent out, right? There was a blog post on this that I'd written, and that shares what your vision could look like. So if you'd like to volunteer your vision statement, feel free to just enter it in the chat window. And, we can read out a few of these vision statements. And we'd love to just see kind of what your vision statement looks like. In the meanwhile, while you guys are doing that, I can share the vision statement that I would have written for the startup that I had a couple of years ago. And instead of telling you, what that startup was, I'm just going to go ahead and read the vision statement. So the vision statement we would have had was, today when amateur wine drinkers want to try and find wines that they are likely to like, they have to buy wines that are on promotion or pick attractive looking bottles. This is unacceptable because this leads to hits and misses, mostly misses. We envision a world where finding wines you like is as easy as finding movies you like on Netflix. We're bringing about this world through a recommendations algorithm that matches wines to your taste and an operational setup that delivers these wines to your door. So does anyone else want to share their vision statement here? And I think if one of you wants to read it out, I think you could unmute yourself. Any volunteers? And if you're unable to unmute, you could also just raise your hand. Okay. This is something that, if you guys still want to enter your vision statement in the chat window, you're welcome to. And if we can always come back to this as we have time at the end. And I'm happy to, we can read out some of these vision statements if you choose to. I'll keep going. So one of the things that, I want to point out in this vision statement, right, is when I was telling you the vision statement for my startup, really, you didn't have any background on what I was doing at my startup. But hopefully at the end of this, at the end of sharing this vision statement, you probably saw that you knew exactly what we were up to, right? And that's really the goal of your vision statement, that it should be super clear and very specific to the point where someone knows exactly what your company does.
Radhika, so before you move on, we have someone who replied, and I'm just wondering if he wants to, because we want it to be interactive, we can learn all from each other. I just wanted to ask Carl Karl-Heinz if he wanted to share it now. I'm going to unmute you. Oh, and then we have a response from Philip.
Okay.
Carl says no. Okay. Okay, but we have Philip, so I think it's good to learn from each other. And since you took the time to share it with us, yeah, do you want to cover that, Radhika?
I don't see it in the chat window, so it may not be sent to everyone.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to read it out.
Okay,
so it's privately sent to me. No, it's thank you, Philip.
Thank you. Okay, let me read this out then. Or Philip, if you're unmuted, you're welcome to.
Yes, I can read it out. This is a made-up scenario because I can't share my real vision.
Okay.
But I thought I can at least put the pieces to place to share a make-up scenario of a product that I think would be valuable. So today, when people with type 2 diabetes want to maintain a safe sugar level, they have to poke themselves and take a blood sample. This is unacceptable because they're constantly poking themselves to get a read of their blood sugar or sugar level. We envision a world where people have a read of their sugar level on a constant basis without poking themselves. We are bringing this world about through biometric sensors that link to a mobile phone app where people can use a thumb reader to identify and constantly monitor their sugar level.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing this. And I love this, right? Because it tells me exactly what you're working on. It has a very clear definition of, what type of people you're targeting. It's people with type 2 diabetes, and it's wonderful that you're being so specific, right? Because very often it's tempting to want to create a vision that addresses a large number of people and make it as generic as possible. So I love the level of detail in here so that you know exactly what you're going after. So thank you for sharing this. This is awesome. Okay, so now that we have a really clear, the idea of starting with user centricity with a really clear vision, the next step is translating that into a strategy. So a strategy, a good product strategy starts with 4 questions. And the easy mnemonic to remember it is radical, so RDCL. The R stands for, what's the pain? What makes someone engage with your product? And then, that's basically the reason they're coming to you. The D for design is, what's the solution that solves that pain? Capabilities is, how do we fulfill the promise of design? And the last one is logistics. How do we deliver it? This is where we think about things like our sales plan, our business model, how do we support this product, etc. So I want to take a case study, right? And I want to share with you the idea of microfinance and talk about strategy from that context. So in 2006, Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize for his innovation in microfinance. And microfinance was really poised to change the world. The idea was that it was going to eliminate poverty. That was really the intended change. And microcredit was going to be that vehicle for eliminating poverty because it was going to give people the small amounts of money that they needed to invest in their business. So let's translate this vision, right, into a product strategy. Because maybe that'll shed some insight into what went wrong, because microcredit just really never panned out the way it was supposed to. Like, it didn't end up solving poverty, right? And so if we look at a radical strategy for microcredit, the first thing in terms of pain points, the pain point it was supposed to address was that all poor people are entrepreneurs. And all they really needed was some cash flow so that they could invest in the business. And so the design was going to be that if microloans could just, give them that small investment that they needed, they could start to lift themselves out of poverty. In terms of capabilities, to fulfill the promise of the design, in addition to providing the microloan, they needed to do some education for people, right? So understanding basics like what is compounding interest, how do you, the importance of repaying these loans, education on personal finance and managing finance. And the last thing in terms of logistics was, of course, if it was supposed to solve poverty, it had to be a sustainable business model. So meaning banks charged some interest rate, but it couldn't be exorbitant because obviously it was meant to help the poor. And the idea in logistics was also making sure that people felt the social pact that they were going to pay back these loans. So what went wrong? Let's analyze where it went wrong. So in 2019, actually, the Nobel Prize for Economics, two of the people that it went to was Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee. So what they did was they took a really scientific approach to understanding the pain points behind poverty. They were working on understanding what was the root cause and how do you actually solve it, and running randomized controlled trials to get to the bottom of some of the assumptions behind poverty. And what they found was that many of these assumptions we have of poverty were actually flawed. So the first thing that they realized was flawed was that in terms of the real pain points, it was really a vast generalization to say that all poor people are entrepreneurs, and if we just gave them credit, that they could lift themselves out of poverty. Just like it would be a vast generalization to say, all millennials are entrepreneurs, or all baby boomers are entrepreneurs, right? The other assumption that was made was that if they invested microcredit into their business, that they could lift themselves from poverty. So the reality was somewhat different. What they found was, let's think about actually the example of startups. Some startups do well, some startups don't do well. So the same thing was happening with many of these entrepreneurs. Even when they invested money, not everyone was able to lift themselves out of poverty. And in fact, on average, when you looked at whether microloans was transformative in a community, it turned out that it was not transformative exactly because of that. Some entrepreneurs did okay and others didn't. So those were, some of the basic assumptions, right, that were flawed in microcredit. And so the first important lesson in our strategy is that whatever we come up with in terms of pain points, designs, capability, logistics, etc., our assumptions need to be validated. So that was the first major lesson. But the second thing in microcredit, right, what really put the nail in the coffin was that when microcredit was commercialized beyond Grameen Bank, which is what Mohammed Yunus headed up, things got a lot worse. So what happened? It turned out banks in Mexico, banks in India, many of them that were offering microcredit, saw this as an opportunity to become financially successful. So many of them actually went IPO, and this was for hundreds of millions of dollars. So what happened because of that? Let's look at strategy. That affected the capabilities and logistics. So instead of focusing on education, right, for microloans, what ended up happening was they focused on aggressive marketing tactics. It was all about getting more microloans out there. Instead of a sustainable business model, right, it all of a sudden became about charging higher interest rates because their primary responsibility was to shareholders. And so what happened in the end was that social pact for repaying loans, right, that was also part of logistics, that broke down. That trust in microfinance broke down. And actually the result of that was the entire microfinance industry was on the brink of collapse. And so all of this happened because the RDCL strategy was really just breaking down because it wasn't really thought through carefully to align it with the vision and align it with reality. So in the end, right, Mohammed Yunus wrote an op-ed in 2011 saying commercialization ended up being a terrible wrong turn for microfinance, and it bred a whole industry of loan sharks that Yunus never actually expected. So I think one of the key takeaway lessons for us is that, you know, when we actually work on our business strategy, a key point is our logistics, right? We often think about our business model as something where we'll figure out the business model after we've gotten traction in the market. A business model very often ends up being something that is an afterthought, right? And so instead, give me 1 second while I move this. And so instead, what we really need to do is we have to think about that really as part of our product. So what I want us to do next, if I can get this working, is I'd like us to work through one example, and this could be an example where, you know, you have you've had a business model maybe, or you see business models where the way of making money, the business model itself, doesn't align with user needs. So I'd like you to take a moment to think about that. And then I'm happy to throw out ideas as well. But as you have ideas, you know, feel free to throw it up here. And while, oh, very interesting example, real estate agents. That's a great example, exactly. It's in their interest to actually charge, well, that the house sells for more, and so you as a buyer end up paying more, but it also means that real estate agent gets more. Family law, that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of that. I'd love to hear more about this one. Credit rating agencies. Oh, that was a good one, right? That was 2008, was precisely that problem. Oh, this is an interesting one too. Retail stores giving the same experience as e-commerce. This is awesome. One example that I can think of as well is the example of insurance. So in the case of insurance, right, if you've ever had to file an insurance claim, there is oh, there you go, medical care specialists as well. Brilliant. Yeah, so in the case of insurance, if you've ever had to file a claim, like you see how they have every incentive to not, every incentive to deny that claim. Excellent. So let's keep going. I see that there's a question in chat. I think this is a really good question that I'd like to come back to at the end of this presentation. So let's keep going for now. So, you know, what I do want to mention about this business model and the conflict, right, is that you may not always have control over it. But the first thing is, as a business leader, if we, as a product leader, if we can at least acknowledge where there are intrinsic conflicts between our business model and user needs, that's a good starting point. And over time, you may be able to resolve it, but the solution starts with actually that acknowledgement. And so through your product strategy, you translate your vision into your action, thinking through all 4 of the RDCL elements. So, okay, now you've thought about your vision and strategy. Prioritization is where you put this into action, right? Prioritization means that we're balancing making progress towards the vision against the reality of survival. And so the reason I bring this up is because when we're being user-centric, right, we still have to balance the reality of doing the right thing for our users with surviving to fight another day. Like, we can't do everything pro bono, for example, because then we wouldn't survive to be able to reach our vision. So how do we think about this, right? Prioritization is how you actually apply your vision and strategy into execution. And what that means is, if we think like Ray, if we close our eyes, we should be able to say, I see light, darkness, I see a balance, right? That's what we're striving for, that balance. And so the way you can think about this balance is on this 2x2 axis, where your y-axis is vision fit. And now you have a clear vision that acts as a filter, so you can tell whether something is a good vision fit or not. The second axis is survival, right? And that survival helps you decide, is this helping me live another day? So to give you an example, let's say you're refactoring code for 3 months, you're investing in the vision, right? Because it's not helping you survive, but it is a good vision fit. The opposite of that, right, is when you're building vision debt. So let's say you have a web page and you're putting more advertising on this web page. In that case, it's helping you survive, but in terms of a vision fit, it's not necessarily helping you get closer to your vision. And so in that case, you're taking on vision debt. So vision debt is like technical debt, except it's on the vision side. And just like technical debt, it's something that's just really hard to pay back, right? You have to actually think about it and plan ahead. And so by looking at this vision versus survival, we can think about, are we more on the light side, which is further up, or are we on the dark side? And there are no absolutes. This is not a value or a moral judgment, right? It's all about how much light and dark, how much balance to the force are you really bringing? And even, if the reality of our work may be such that, you're working in a company where you may feel like you're more on the dark side than the light. And again, no moral judgment, but it's important to acknowledge that. And you may have a personal vision versus survival, and you decide for yourself, how much do you want to be on the light or the dark side, right? And so you can have your own vision versus survival and one for the company, and you decide, over time, where you want to be. But again, this is a matter of acknowledgement and then really thinking about what does it mean to you to be user-centric. And the point is that it's about being thoughtful about, not really going over to the dark side, right? So the last step, now that we've done vision, strategy, and prioritization, is the execution and measurement. So in terms of execution and measurement, right, today, Lean and Agile is where we've really become experts at Lean and Agile, and that's really where we are really comfortable, right? So it keeps us in this realm of strategy and execution where we do quick feedback loops. So Lean and Agile give you speed when it comes to strategy and when it comes to feedback-based execution. And so now with radical product thinking, that gives you direction. So if you put your direction together with your Lean and Agile execution, you get direction plus speed, and that gives you forward velocity. And so that's how you can use radical product thinking together with Lean and Agile. And so how do you apply radical product thinking in the realm of execution and measurement? So I'll talk more about measurement because Lean and Agile have execution well covered. In terms of measurement, right, you can now that you have a strategy, you can start to translate each of the elements of your strategy into hypotheses. So for example, right, in the case of microcredit, one of the hypotheses that could have been written was that that all poor people are entrepreneurs, that giving them credit will resolve poverty, right? Those are all assumptions that you can state. And so you can plan on metrics to say, how will we actually test these metrics? How will we test these hypotheses? And your activities, this is what you take on in every sprint through Lean and Agile. Your activities are all the actions that you're going to take so that you can use, so that you can prove or disprove these hypotheses. And you'll you approve or disapprove them using those metrics. So if you look at the Radical Product Toolkit, right, here's what that would look like. You would write out your hypotheses in the if, then, because format, your key metrics, and then that drives what are your activities. And so the example that I want to give you here, right, I started the hour talking about Prodigy Game, and that was an example of digital pollution because of some of the inequality it was creating, at least in my household, when it came to education. I want to share with you a very different example, and that is Khan Academy. So a friend of mine worked as the VP of Design at Khan Academy. Her name is Mei Li Ku. And you know, what's interesting to me is that ever since I've known her, she always cared about inclusion and thinking about how our products affect people, right? And so it's really clear, both in terms of design as well as what she was measuring. It was clear that she cared about how products were affecting people. So the vision at Khan Academy, first of all, is very clear. It's providing free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And so what that meant was they weren't measuring very shallow metrics, for example, you know, how much time is spent on the site by users, right? Instead, a lot of the focus Mei Li told me about was that they were focusing on user testing so that they could observe kids of all types to really understand, was the functionality something that was helping people equally? And, you know, this is a small nonprofit, and it wasn't like their budget was unlimited, right? So as a nonprofit, in fact, they didn't spend that much time in terms of testing every color palette and shades of blue, but it was really on functionality and testing whether it was creating equality in how they were educating. The other thing that really struck me about, you know, what Mei Li was measuring was that she ended up measuring also team dynamics. And what that meant was, you know, so if you want to address a really diverse user group, you can't have a design team that's very homogeneous, right? You have to have an equally diverse design and teaching team. And so what she really cared about was diversity within her team, and she measured for it. So every week, they actually had a really quick survey to ask people whether they felt valued on the team, whether they felt like their work was sustainable, whether, you know, they could share views with their manager that were disagreeing with the manager without any negative repercussions. So I think the big takeaway from this example, right, of Khan Academy is, if we want to measure for being truly user-centric, we can't just look at a lot of the vanity metrics. So it's not about the time on site or the user engagement by itself. It's deeper questions that are derived from your vision and strategy. And that's really the important way to measure user-centricity by design. So one thing I'd love to get your thoughts on next is, so, you know, based on what we've talked about so far, I would love to hear, how are you thinking about what you would want to measure differently? And so again, we'll go to menti.com. And what is one metric that you want to measure differently? Either start measuring that you haven't been measuring so far, or stop measuring. What's one change you want to make to what you're measuring? That's an interesting one. So tell me more. Is that something that you want to stop measuring or start measuring lifetime value? This may be something where you may have to unmute yourself.
He just wrote start measuring.
Okay. Here's another one. People's intention, what makes them leave the platform. And those are more qualitative things that you're talking about. Start measuring user satisfaction, not only the profit contributed by each user. I really love that. I think that's and that's a hard one to measure as well, right? And may end up being something more qualitative. Start measuring inspiration and entertainment value. Okay. Start measuring user time value. Interesting, and that's probably something that also, relates to social media, for example, where, how are we valuing people's time? Excellent. So this is really wonderful. I think maybe what we'll do is you guys can keep adding more comments there as well, but maybe what we'll do next is I also want to move into questions. So just to conclude on this, right? The point is we can really start to bake user centricity into every step of how we're building products. So starting with, what's our vision and centering our vision on our users down to the strategy, prioritizing and staying more on the light side. And then lastly, in how we measure what matters, whether we're actually making progress towards the vision, right? And by taking this very systematic approach, what we're really doing is we're systematically building products that are both successful and ones that can change the world in whatever way that truly inspires you. And that's really the sense of what it means to be truly user-centric. We can be successful while also creating a positive change in the world. So if you want to learn more, there's the free toolkit from radicalproduct.com. There's a blog that's accessible as well. I'm going to be doing a detailed workshop. It's limited to only 12 attendees, and that's going to be on June 16th and June 18th, doing that with Business of Software. So you're welcome to look that up. And the last thing is that my book will be coming out in September next year. And you can join the mailing list. So if you end up downloading the toolkit, you can join the mailing list, and then I'll also be sending out free chapters along the way. So with that, I want to open it up to questions. And you can share your questions in one of two formats. If it's easier for you, you can type it up in chat. But we can vote up questions, which may be easier so that people can start to upvote, downvote questions as well, and we can make sure that we address the most possible. So feel free to start sharing your questions.
While they are sharing, there was one point, already a question where you wanted to come back to. Would you like to start answering? It was from Melanie, asking how I know how specific detail I should have, because detail stands for me against vision and big thinking. And this was something that you mentioned you would come back to this.
Great, okay, excellent question. So yeah, so I think you have to be, okay, so if you're so specific, where you're detailing the how all the way down to your specific method. So, if you think about the vision statement, the last part of the vision statement, which is we're bringing this world about through ... right? If you're super specific about that, for instance, an algorithm that does this, this, and this, if you're at that level, you may discover that your methods may need to change. And so because of that, it's important to stay at a slightly higher level. But the answer to things like, when people, today when, and who are you targeting, things like that have to be super detailed. If, in fact, you have multiple user groups that you can clearly identify, you should prioritize those. Because the reality is that, your vision, there's only so much that you can address, and your vision, if it's acting as a good filter, it's also helping you decide what is more or less important. So, it's really hard to get much more specific than that. Like, I gave you the example of my vision statement where we talked about a user group as amateur wine drinkers. In reality, we got as specific as saying if there are user groups, if there are wine drinkers on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is a wine expert, like a winemaker, we were targeting 2 to 6. You really want to get to that level of specificity. And then, over time, you can continue to expand on your vision as you have achieved certain parts. Let's see, the next one question that came up here is, how would you suggest managing up to have global company vision and strategy? So, yeah, that's often one of the most frustrating points for product leaders, right? You feel like you have an echo chamber where people see what people agree with you, but not necessarily up top. So one of the things that I end up doing is using this vision worksheet with more senior leaders within the company. So the idea is that, you want to couch it as, this is my vision for my product, but you also want to get the leaders really on board with that vision. And the same thing with strategy. So what I often do is this vision statement, I use this as a group exercise, and that helps you get people on board both with a vision and strategy. And then, once you've gotten them on board with a vision, especially, maybe not even strategy, once you've gotten them on board with a vision, you can start to use the 2x2 matrix. And so every time you're in a meeting where you're making priority decisions, you start to use the 2x2. If you're deciding, whether you should take a sales opportunity or not, and your CEO wants to, talk about where that goes. Is it a vision debt? Is it investing in the vision, or is it ideal? And that helps to start incorporating this vocabulary and get people to start thinking about, what is our vision, and incorporating that in the decisions that people are making. So one other question was from Rishit Jain. So the question is, okay, so you create a vision, prove it's successful and sustainable, but it's taken out of context to make higher profits. And you just don't have a say anymore on this. And how can you handle this as a product leader? And I think this goes back to talking about the vision versus strategy. I think this constant, so one of the problems that I see, right, what often happens is we build a vision and a strategy, and then we go into execution mode, and we never really go back to revisit that vision and strategy. We don't talk about, is our business model still aligned with what users need? And so this is something that, really you want to periodically revisit. Probably, in a startup, you might want to do that every quarter. But in a more mature company, maybe you want to do this every 6 months or maybe every year. And definitely because of COVID, right? We definitely want to do it more often at the moment because things are so unprecedented. And so this opportunity to revisit your vision and strategy really kind of helps try to refocus people on what were we intending to do. Let's see.
We cannot, Radhika, we cannot see the questions moving. Is it possible to change so that we can see the question you're actually answering?
Oh, sorry. The question that I was reading out was from Rishi Jain. That was in the chat. Oh, sorry. Let me put this out to,
okay.
Let me copy and paste this to everyone. Okay. That was the question that I was just answering. Let's see. Another question was from Philip. So the question was, how do you tie the vision to everyday execution, the tasks that people do every day? Excellent. So, this one where we were talking about, here, let me go back to the presentation for 1 second, and I can walk you through that slide. So, okay, so we had crafted the vision and strategy. So you use the strategy to then create a list of initiatives that are split over time, right? And you can use this prioritization to be able to say, how are you going to take on, like, how you can use this to be able to decide what are you going to do first, second, and third. Like, you can't do everything in the investing in the vision column. You may need to balance it with doing some things in the ideal and building vision depth potentially as well. So you use this to build a roadmap. And then when you move into execution, this is where you can plan your sprints that translates each of those initiatives from your roadmap into your activities. And this way, you know, you have a translation from your vision to strategy and then into execution. And so this list of activities is basically what you end up doing in your lean and agile execution, in your regular, you know, sprints or waterfall, whatever you're going to do. Did that answer the question? Excellent. Let's see, were there any other questions? Anything else that people want to ask? One of the questions that I get very often is, what's the difference between vision and mission, right? That probably is like most often asked question. And to me, you know, and there's always this confusion of what's the right vocabulary, because in my company, you know, we have vision, mission, values, or is it mission, vision, values? Like all this terminology is used interchangeably. So my view on that, right, is even when I see vision, mission, values, or whatever it is, often what I see is that the approach taken is that it's super broad and it doesn't get specific enough. So to me, vision means that we have to be able to actually see what is the world that we want to create. And so the vision has to be detailed enough that you can actually picture it in your mind's eye. And your team can see this too. And that's why you're able to recreate that world that you can see in your head. And so vision has to be that. Often vision in companies is seen as the higher level thing. If it's a matter of just vocabulary, you can just get around that vocabulary by just calling it, you know, we need a radical vision statement. Here's a fill in the blank statement. It sort of gets around this whole issue of vision, mission, values, and, you know, where does it fit in, etc. You just use, you know, a detailed vision for each product. Here's another question. How do you align people with vision and strategy? And do you think OKRs are important? I'm going to take the last part of this first. Do you think OKRs are important? So my view with OKRs, right, is that very often OKRs feel arbitrary to teams. Very often OKRs are basically metrics handed down from above, and people in the product teams themselves are often looking at these OKRs saying, okay, sure, that's how I'm going to be measured, but I have no idea, why are we measuring this? And so in terms of aligning people, I think these group exercises are super important. So the way I often use this in companies, right, is very often I try doing this with an executive group where you write the vision statement within the executive group as a group exercise. And then, you know, each product within the company may be able to, will be able to at least know, here's the top level vision of the company in a very detailed level. And then each product team can write their own vision statement. And the goal that you want to aim for as a company, right, is you want to be able to look at every vision statement from the different product teams, and you want to be able to make sure that they're all aligned. So someone at the top has to be able to look at these vision statements and say, how are they aligned, and are they aligned? And then look at strategy for each group and whether it's aligned. And the important thing about this, right, is that when you have such detailed vision for different people or different teams, it helps you allow them some freedom because they have such a clear vision. Okay, so there are a couple of more questions. It says, how do you suggest defining the vision for the products that exist within a company as opposed to the entire company vision? So I actually think that this vision statement, the fill in the blanks, it's ideal for using it at a product level. And you can use it at a company level, but it becomes harder at a company level if you are something like an Amazon. If you have so much diversification, it becomes super hard to write one vision statement. So if a company is more focused, let's say, actually, let's think of an example of a company. A company like Twitter absolutely could use something like this, but something like Amazon would find it harder. But every product team will be able to use this sort of a product vision. So it's important to write it at different levels within the organization. The next question was from Melanie. OKRs can measure more than normal KPIs, for example, experience of a product. I agree, they can help you do that. And sorry, I just realized it's not a question. And I think it's not that OKRs are bad. I think as long as it's very clear how they're tied to the strategy and to the vision, it makes it much easier to actually apply that and make the OKRs not feel arbitrary to teams. It helps align the team on OKRs when it's clear how they're derived from the vision and strategy. This question from Ntumba was, how does one employ RDCL thinking for designing big systems? And hi, it's wonderful to see you. Ntumba is a great friend from a long time ago. How does one employ RDCL thinking for designing big systems, such as designing in the public sector, where the user's needs are often poorly articulated and very diverse? So that's a really good question, right? And I'm actually using this in the public sector right now. And you're right, the user's needs are so diverse. Often they're not very well articulated. So what can we do? So two things. One is think about your vision, your strategy. Think about those as stakes in the ground. It's your best guess, it's your hypothesis. And then you're going to have to really validate each of those. In terms of your vision, also your strategy, because the needs are so diverse, it actually means that we have to be very disciplined about taking a very prioritized approach. And it's very often hard to prioritize because it feels like all of these users are important. But you know, it's we have to start somewhere. And so forcing yourself to articulate your priorities, whose needs you're going to address first, second, and third, is a good exercise so that you can actually plan your activities, your roadmap accordingly. Otherwise, especially when you just start applying product thinking, if you're just getting started, if you're spread out too much across too many initiatives and too many priorities, it's easier to fail. So in fact, it becomes more important to try and prioritize, especially because it's so diverse. Any other last couple of questions where we're now 10 minutes past the hour? The comment was, you create a vision, prove it's successful and sustainable, but it's taken out of. Yep. And that definitely happens, that it can be taken out of context. And I think as product leaders, it's really for us to find opportunities to kind of bring people back to the original vision and strategy and explain where there are misalignments, right? And part of how I end up using radical product thinking is that I use it to share my rationale with my team. And by doing that, we try to share how we're thinking about it so our teams can think about it in similar ways, even when we're not around. So, okay, I don't see any other questions. So I'd like to do just one last thing, which is I would, let's see, sorry, 1 second. Oh, I see. Sorry, there were more questions here. I wasn't seeing it. It wasn't scrolling. Have I answered all questions, or are there ones that I've not answered?
We kept copying them in the chat.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for doing that.
I'm not sure if you answered this one though, with the new, this one, would you run this exercise for every product you build within your product space? For example, new features for the user, or would you define your vision statement only once at the start of a product lifecycle? Like partially you already responded to that, but I'm just copy pasting to the chat.
Thank you. So this on this one, right, I actually sometimes do use this for new features. If a feature is big enough, sometimes I find that it's helpful to have a clear vision for that feature. But most often, I create a vision statement at a product level instead of for every feature, because there's a cognitive load even for your team to be able to create these vision statements. There was another question from Gaurav saying, are you not in favor of lean strategy? So I think lean is great for execution. And what happens very often is that the philosophy is, let's just try things in the market and we'll iterate and somehow we'll end up in the right place. That's what I'm not in favor of, when we're actually over-relying on iteration. Because what happens is that lean is great to be able to execute fast. But very often, right, lean helps us find local maxima, but not necessarily the global maximum. Lean will help us optimize for financial metrics and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what's the long-term thing, where are you going? And that's where I think we need a very clear vision, a strategy, and then you can execute using lean and agile, and that is great. Lean is just not a replacement for the direction, and sometimes that's how it's used. It's viewed as, we don't need to have a clear vision to embark on the journey. And that ends up leading to a lot of product diseases. And I didn't talk about product diseases that I often talk about in talks, but product diseases is basically where, it's these contagious diseases that often make our products fail. One example I'll give you, which is probably my favorite of the product disease, is obsessive sales disorder. What happens in obsessive sales disorder is, for each customer that comes along and says, oh, I have this one request, will you do this for us? And, that's the answer tends to be, yes, let's do it, right? Without thinking about, is it aligned with our vision or not? And that's the kind of risk that you run into, because then it defocuses us from where we were originally going. So not against lean startup, it's just it should be used for execution, not for direction. And so, okay, while I still have the last 1 minute or so, I would love to hear your feedback about this talk. Has this made you think more deeply about being a product leader? And if you have any specific aha moments, I would love to hear those. And also, is there something that would be, that you'd like me to talk more about next time? Or any such, here's what I'd love to have more of, less of, etc. So yeah, please go ahead. I'd love to see feedback. Please talk more about product diseases. Okay, excellent. I will definitely do that next time. Would love to see a few more examples. Ntumpa says, my aha moment was related to the concept of vision debt. Cool. Thank you, Carl. This one was, love the prayer matrix aha moment. I'm not sure I caught that one. Tell me more. Can someone unmute themselves to share? Aligning management. Awesome. Would love to run through exercises during the session that would actually make us think and apply. And yes, you're right. That would definitely be good to do. I'm going to do that in the workshop. It's hard to run these exercises, doing each of these vision strategy exercises. It takes a much longer session. This was intended to give an overall view of how do we do this. Digital pollution. So thank you. I'm so glad that that's something that resonated with people as well. Vision debt was another one I see. And then, is this a question about how can I get a mandate from my boss? I'll answer that as a question. I think one approach that you could try in terms of getting a mandate from the boss is, you're welcome to share some of the, well, maybe you can try going at it from the perspective of what you're seeing happening badly. You can talk about some of these product diseases. Maybe that way it doesn't feel like it's attacking kind of what's wrong with the company, but you can talk about how you're identifying the product disease. So I've written about product diseases, and I'm happy to send that out afterwards. At the end, I'll send this blog post to everyone about product diseases. But there are a few examples. Like one is pivotitis, where we keep switching direction. Another example is where there's strategic swelling. So our product continues to just grow and expand and tries to do everything for everyone. Another one is locked-in syndrome, where we're just really stuck in one particular approach because it's been working in the past. We want to keep doing it. So those are some diseases. You can try to get a mandate by applying these diseases or talking about these diseases. So the toolkit was one of the aha moments listed. Awesome. Excellent. And this last comment was, I love the question on whose mission statement that can be. I actually expected a more shocking response. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. This was helpful for me to see your feedback and what were some takeaways for you as well. So thanks a lot for joining. And let's connect over LinkedIn as well. Feel free to reach out to me. And I look forward to seeing you at one of my next few talks and on the mailing list. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Radhika. And you got a lot of questions, so it's been very successful. Thank you so much. Before everyone leaves, I just wanted to mention that we are continuing with PMF Connect sessions bi-weekly. So in about 2 weeks, we are going to have another PMF Connect session. Information is coming soon. And then I wanted to announce the upcoming PMEP, the Executive Education, Product Executive Education live webinar with Professor Noah Askin from INSEAD on COVID and organizational culture. It's a free webinar, so here's the registration link if you want to attend. And otherwise, warm thanks to Radhika and everyone joining, and thank you very much, and I wish you a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.